Why is Harry Potter never anyone's favorite character in Harry Potter? Can you be a real fan if you only saw the movies and never read the books? Why is this fandom so obsessed with the Marauders? These are all questions that'll be answered in part two of my conversation with Eric Scull from MuggleCast, along with characters that were just absolutely assassinated by the author, his thoughts on the upcoming TV series, and more. Welcome to Belated Binge Harry Potter, the re-binge podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. I'm Zach. Let's do it.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
So you said you had a bunch of questions. I'd really like to get to.
I do. I do. The strangest way that I feel like I can describe the Harry Potter fandom as somebody who has gotten into it so late and is still so much, very much just like kind of like on the outskirts of it, looking into it. I'm sort of getting in, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Is that it is weirdly gatekeepy while being incredibly welcoming, which seems like the juxtaposition of a lifetime. But what I mean is like the fact that I can exist within it and that I've actually been welcomed by. So one of the most rewarding things about having this podcast has been interacting and building relationships with other podcast hosts within this space that have been in this space, like yourself, like the Julianas, like the folks over at the restricted section. I've been on so many podcasts, Pottership. I've been on the Dusty Cauldron. I've been on gosh, I'm gonna try not to. I've worked with First Years. I've worked with the Fox and the Foxhound. Like I've worked with so many of these great podcasts and gotten to know these people and it's been so welcoming and so like amazing. And the fact that anybody listens to this podcast is like, it is open to new content and new ideas and new perspectives in a way that like blows my mind, from somebody who really most of my life has been like sports driven and sports media and content driven. That like, that's the complete opposite. You're an idiot in that in that area, no matter what
I
you
am.
have
Yes,
to say.
me specifically,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
well, no, like you can have decades of experience, open your mouth once, and you are just an idiot if you're talking sports. That's just how that, like,
People
that's
are
just
so
how
combative.
that world is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But this, like, it is welcome. New is welcome to this fandom that has been around for so long, which is amazing to me. But what is almost gatekeepy is the interpretation of like characters and motivations and stuff like that. Like I have been absolutely roasted on social media for certain takes that I've had about characters and portrayals of in my interpretation of those characters and their motivations and stuff like that, where people are like, you are an absolute moron that like doesn't deserve to breathe kind of like level of just like probably fair in some aspects, but it's very common where you get into these discussions on and maybe it's because it's an internet driven fandom. People are very, very bold and very like over the top in their interpretation of it. And if yours differs from they are going to defend and almost attack. So that almost feels gatekeepy, but on the whole, it's actually a very, very welcoming place. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, that is a really interesting kind of way of looking at it, and certainly your perspective is super valid. I also think you deserve to be breathing, so please keep doing that.
Thank you.
And a lot of that
hopefully
is
my daughter thanks you. If anybody,
yeah,
else.
a couple of things come to mind when you say that. But number one is that's internet commenting for you.
Yeah.
You like, because of anonymity, which the internet has dabbled with over time. It used to be that like on AOL screen names, you would choose just whatever was like loosely about you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Facebook happened, it was like you're showing up as your authentic self, your name. And then now when like individual fans became brands of their own, it became important to have your own name or a really popular handle. And now I feel like there's like on LinkedIn and stuff, there's like this, it needs to be you authentic, but
Mm-hmm.
people still like on Reddit or on Discord or whatever, you just pick a handle and you can insult somebody, or on YouTube and you can just be so violent and so mean
Mm-hmm.
because of anonymity. It's so crazy to watch like what spaces are we ourselves and could face potentially blowback and consequences for our actions versus
Yeah.
where can we just shit talk somebody on the web. And that's such a wild thing. So I think a lot of that is like, don't read your own comments, or understand if you're going to read comments on literally anything you've ever posted on the internet, be prepared for
Oh yeah.
trolls and awful people, and don't take it personal. And it's one of the hardest lessons to learn, because I've been doing this for ages and everything feels personal still. Every negative comment. But it's not. It's really, really, really not. But the other thing that I will say about the gatekeeping aspect of it, there have been certain things in this fandom that have always divided people. Do you ship Harry and Ginny, or do you ship Harry and Hermione? And back before the books had ended, that was a major divide
Hmm.
among people. It was made worse when Emerson Sparks interviewed J.K. Rowling in her home in Scotland, and they had just read, I think, the 7th book, and Emerson was like, "Oh God, thank God, Harry ended up with Ginny. Can you imagine if it were Harry Hermione?" And then J.K. Rowling like sniggered too and was like, "Haha, yeah, I've always thought the people that thought Harry would end up with Hermione are like." And she was searching for the word, and then Emerson supplied delusional, and she goes, ha, 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 kind of a thing. And like, man, the fandom, that was a dark day. There were probably death threats, like people who really thought that Harry and Hermione were anything more than brother and sister that should end up together, that they completed each other, or whatever, whatever, whatever. Like
Hmm.
the fandom, and that's the thing, is these stories mean so much to each person.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, especially if you have been in the fandom for years, you feel protective of your personal interpretation. You feel defensive of your personal interpretation, especially if you're somebody that the more times you reread a book, the more ammo you get to form your own wrong opinion about the book. And so it makes you more defensive. And because we're on the internet and anybody can say shit to anybody else, that compounds the problem. And so I really think that there've always been those lines across the fandom of like,
Hmm.
if you say something wrong, if you say something, there's a chance a lot of people will actually disagree with it, but it doesn't mean you're wrong. But yeah, it's like the gatekeeping aspect of the fandom, I can see that. And I can also see it was always an issue, talking about other divides in fandom,
Hmm.
whether you were a Harry Potter fan, whether you could consider yourself a fan of Harry Potter if you just saw the movies.
Yeah, that was the next thing that I was thinking of was book readers versus movie watchers, and that feud that I'm sure has been.
I still don't have an answer for it. Like, the obvious answer is you're still a fan if you just saw the movies.
Yeah, you can be a
But
Harry Potter fan, a movie fan.
yeah,
That's okay.
sure.
You can be a fan of
But
movies.
like, but the part of me that's like, but the books are so much
Oh,
better,
they're so much better.
wants to tell everybody to go and do that. And if calling them not a real fan will inspire them to read the book so they can become a real fan approved by me. So there's a gatekeeping aspect in me. But it
Fair.
comes from a place of wanting them to, see the good quality. But what is and isn't good quality is also subjective. Maybe there's
Yeah.
people out there that think that the books are childish. Maybe there's people out there that disagree with me on certain movies and what they mean, and whether they're good or not.
Hmm.
And it's just a wide world. I think it's because people feel so intimately connected with these stories. They're engaging with the stories on such a level that you will get a lot of that sort of toxicity, or the potential for
Hmm.
toxicity, in online fandom spaces. That's just how it all works.
Yeah. Okay, so into the characters.
Mm.
I posted an Instagram reel a while back, and it did well for me. But I think it goes back to an idea in the fandom of you can't be, or I guess I should ask it this way: can you be a real Harry Potter fan if Harry Potter is your favorite character in Harry Potter?
It's an interesting choice. I'm roasting you. It's
No, go.
yes you can. Um but I think there's an aversion to choosing. Most people, I think, have an aversion to choosing Harry as their favorite character.
I know, I agree.
Even if when you get down to it, Harry Potter's like, it's important everyone likes Harry Potter. It's important everyone reading the book that he's not so annoying
Yeah.
like he is in book 5,
Oh wow.
that
Yeah.
you turn away from Harry Potter. But
Hmm.
there's a benefit in characterization to being a cool teacher or like a Remus Lupin or a Sirius Black, or only in certain books,
Mhm.
because it's more bite-sized. The human mind can fill in the gaps. There's a
Yeah.
lot of head canons out there. That's a big thing of like what Tonks was really like, or what her school years would have been like, or with the Marauders, it's like, let's imagine what they, and because there's like fertile ground there for imagining,
Mhm.
that's a reason why people gravitate away from Harry, because everything Harry has ever done has been chronicled.
Yep. That was literally what the reel said was Harry Potter would be your favorite character in the series if it wasn't told from his perspective.
That's interesting.
But because you spend the entire time inside of his head, you choose somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I like that checks out on my end, and because we do think about it that way, about what you're saying is we gravitate towards the hero. And if it weren't written from his perspective, we want to hear that story of him persevering, because the
Yeah.
hero's journey is as old as time. It goes back to Beowulf and Gilgamesh. It's like the earliest story ever written had heroes and villains, and that's the kind of story we consume. It is a consequence of the fact that the books are written from Harry's perspective that more people don't choose him as a favorite character, but he's great.
Okay. So another thing that this fandom has going in it that is as consistent as anything else. This fandom is obsessed with the Marauders, as obsessed with the Marauders as Snape is with Lily, it seems.
Wow. That
Why
implies that implies a degree of unhealthy love, actually, which I
it
find amusing.
it but it also might be true. What is it about the Marauders? And I bring this up with you specifically because I'm pretty sure this is right in your wheelhouse. Like, but what is it about the Marauders? Like, why that aspect? Why have so many people latched onto that?
I love this question so much. Uh, of course, I have a very specific theory. I have a very
Please.
specific theory that answers this question. So, if you look at Prisoner of Azkaban, which we're actually currently about to wrap up on MuggleCast, we have, I think, 2 chapters left of our chapter by chapter revisit. Shout out to MuggleCast. Available
What?
wherever podcasts are found. Yeah, it's some show we do.
Never heard of it.
Don't worry about it. So if you look at book 3, the entire crux of the book is this misdirect. It's a mystery surrounding Sirius Black. You're told from the get-go there's an escaped prisoner from Azkaban that is coming to kill Harry. And you're like, okay, this is the 3rd time we've read this book. There's always somebody bad coming for Harry. It's always going to resolve at the end of the book. Well, however, this book dares do something different, because the connection that Harry has to the so-called bad guy is not that he killed his parents, or even what
Mhm.
the book wants you to think, which is that he betrayed Harry's parents. What ends up happening is it's not actually Sirius Black who is the bad guy, but another one of his Potter's friends. And who witnesses it, and who becomes Harry's best teacher other than another one of Harry's friends, parents' friends. So the Marauders in Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, and the now deceased James Potter complete this hitherto unexplored area up to that point in the Harry Potter books
Mhm.
of Harry's origin. We tend to overemphasize in Western culture and in storytelling this concept of where are we from? Where do we come from? And in order to do that, we look at our roots, but roots go beyond upbringing. They go to our parents. Who were our parents? And any orphan, of course, would want to know who his parents are. And so the fact that book 3 really deeply explores who his parents were gives a feeling of excitement, but also emotional depth that the first 2 books lack. And it is the engagement with this story that informs who Harry is, because it tells us who his parents were, or at least what his dad was like, that the high of receiving that catharsis, or the high of receiving that emotional depth, fuels the entire obsession with the Marauders at large for the rest of time. So the short answer to your question is, I think the obsession that people have, healthy or otherwise, with the Marauders comes straight down to how good the twist is at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, and this idea that his parents were friends with each other and had fun Hogwartsian shenanigans that we don't actually additionally know anything about. So it is something to do with the ripe, fertile ground that our brains can go to, because the topic is almost never explored again. And when it is, it's about a little something different, Snape's worst memory and Prince's Tale. But because we got that amazing revelation that his parents were all friends, they liked each other, and were betrayed by somebody else, it's just it's a good enough hook, it's a good enough twist, and it's a good enough place for imagining, and is unique in that way. There's nothing else that crops up in the Harry Potter books that is as emotionally impactful when it crops up, or as emotionally, I think, resonant in the rest of the series, because Harry, again, is a story about an orphan, and learning who his parents were and knowing that they had fun times together is just like the ultimate place of imagining. I think it captures all of our imaginations.
Is it for you is it the draw of the the foursome, or are you also fascinated in the like Snape Lily side of that whole Marauders era?
For me, it's about the four, but uh a reason that I think it is about the four is because the Snape Lily stuff is well explored.
That's true.
Um,
We get more of that.
we do get a lot more of it, especially because the additional Marauder stuff is exclusively through the lens of Snape.
Yeah.
So Snape's worst memory, Harry's in his memory, and Prince's Tale, Harry's in his memories, and so you see kind of the very well developed fall from grace that Severus Snape, who is the boy that told Lily she was a witch, the boy that gave Lily. I mean, this is why I can see people, at least initially, shipping Lily and Snape, is Snape was her escape from her awful Muggle sister, and her life. Snape was Lily's Hagrid, you know, who
Yeah.
really, not suggesting Harry and Hagrid should be romantically involved, let me state that, but I'm saying,
I'm
like,
sure it exists.
Snape showed Lily a whole new world, and it was his greatest pleasure to do so, to be able to tell her, I know something that you are, and she had no idea. And so their friendship in those early books, where she relied on him to give her more information, was very great, because it gave him a purpose that he never had, also coming from an abusive household. And these are all things that are in the books. And so I'm
Mhm.
talking with more depth now about Snape and Lily than I ever could about the Marauders, because there's more of that kind of explanation, and
Yeah.
the fall from grace, and sort of Snape calling Lily a mudblood, and her really coming to him with these reservations about who he's hanging out with at school. All these beats are there, we know it. And so I think
Yeah.
that because it's more fleshed out, it's less fertile ground for imagining and wonderings. And so I tend to focus on the Marauders, which I still don't know kind of exactly how the Peter Pettigrew betrayal wasn't seen coming a mile away by them, and that speaks to, like it or not, speaks to a level of savvy with Peter, in order to have been able to do that, even though he's a big weasel.
Or
And
just being so irrelevant even within your own friend group that nobody's paying attention to anything you're doing anyway.
yeah, but then it also goes back
Potentially.
to that. No, right. And it goes back to that trope of we make our own enemies, we make
Yeah.
our own worst enemies. And the way in which those boys treated Peter, certainly don't excuse he still made the choice
Well, yeah,
to betray them.
and I
But
don't
yeah,
think we have enough either, just in the defense of the rest. Like, I don't think we have enough on the page that actually suggests they treated him poorly. Like, he may have been the tag along, but he was along. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they could have easily oster ostracized, like,
yeah, like excluded him.
yeah, he could have
Um,
easily not be, it could have not been four of them. You know what I mean? They obviously liked him. They
Yeah,
obviously like,
well,
you know.
if you, I think Harry observes either Pettigrew being bullied by James, or they're like, I think they make some kind of disparaging remark about his intelligence or his capability or something, or somebody says in front of Peter that Peter nearly wet himself trying to get like the snitch from James, or are you remembering something like this? I seem to
Yes,
remember.
perhaps, but I guess
So the idea, yeah, the idea that James and Sirius were bullies goes a long way to explaining kind of, if they saw Peter as that tag along, they would have bullied him too. And it might not be as intensely as they did Snape, but we have this situation in real life all the time where our friends
Mhm.
might be rude to us, and we might be in an uneven friendship that causes us to feel actually quite resentful that we aren't respected more. So there's elements of that I think make it explainable.
I think that's true. I come from the perspective that, and I in my real life I tell people this all the time. If I'm not giving you shit, it means I don't like you.
Mm,
Like, and that's how I interpret the Marauders so much. Like, cause those were my friend groups. Like, we roasted each other. Like,
yeah.
that was part of our friendship. Like, so the if we weren't doing that, it's you weren't in it.
I think
So
that makes a lot of
I
sense.
very much like I think of it in that way a lot.
But
Like, anyway,
yeah, but was everybody on the same page in that roasting group?
typically I think we were, but there were definitely elements I can say from experience of when the friend groups when the when people collided, right? Like when it was all one on one, you always felt like you knew where you were, but once more were introduced and you were all kind of on that same page, you started to like discern a pecking order, I
That's it.
guess. So like I can relate to that in a lot of ways, but it also didn't make me want to kill any of my friends.
Well, right, yeah.
Even,
That's good to
even
know.
you
You're
know,
a normal person
scraps
who,
might happen, but like,
yeah.
murder doesn't need to.
No, that's fair enough. And Pettigrew himself talks about, essentially being tortured by Voldemort
Right.
into revealing what he did, but later his defense of himself doing so is not worth the words that it cost.
Right.
So yeah, but like that's the thing is, if you think about here's another reason the Marauders are so popular. If you think about four people that were friends, you're talking about, I think, 16 relationships, because or at least 12, like their relationship with each other one on one, like you're
Hmm.
saying, and the dynamics they're
Yeah.
in, and then when three of them are together and one of them's out, no matter who it is, there's a separate relationship dynamic to
Hmm.
explore. So it is very, I think, titillating to explore or think about, kind of, because each character is well written enough to be fundamentally different people.
Yeah.
So the idea that they were friends is really exciting.
Yeah. Sirius Black, a very interesting character within the fandom. I believe your favorite character.
Yeah, I would say so. I they
Okay.
there was a time where I think it went away. I think I cooled a little bit. And I couldn't pinpoint when or what character I would have gone to. But as of the last several years, it's back, baby. Like Sirius Black. Yeah, Sirius Black. Definitely favorite character.
Nice. He's very interesting within the fandom. Uh, I'm going to start with me because this, to
Yeah.
me, this is actually fairly interesting. Um, in my interpretation of Sirius Black, and that's the fact that I, I don't like him more than I do, and the reason is because the way that he's portrayed in the books is exactly his image is exactly the type of character that I typically would gravitate towards. I'm like I love Sons of Anarchy. I literally cover the Sons of Anarchy on this podcast. Like Sirius Black, there's plenty of fan fiction that put him in a cut, like a leather jacket. He fits. He's got motorcycle posters on his walls. He's the the incarcerated, the edgy, the warped sense of humor, rough around the
He has a
edges. Like
motorbike.
yes, like he has a motorcycle. Like we could ride together. Like we could be boys.
Why aren't you
And
boys with
yet,
Sirius? Why?
and
Is it,
yet,
well, wait, is it because your favorite character is Harry?
no, he's not.
And
He's not. It's
oh,
just the thought exercise. I'm
oh, okay.
actually, I find Dumbledore incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, he's good.
He's like my favorite. Dumbledore is probably my favorite character in the series, particularly because I think there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it, and it's just a fascinating like discussion point. So I really like Dumbledore, but Sirius, it's the it's the level of immaturity. It's the like pettiness, particularly the pettiness towards Harry that he displays at points, particularly in like the I'm harkening back to well, the thrill would have been what made it fun for
Yeah.
James. You
Yeah.
know, that this nonsense, like you're literally trying to take the child like into harm's way to get your own uh, uh need for,
Hicks, yeah.
yeah, like validation and for danger and whatever else. That stuff bugs me, and I understand that he had a stalling, of those 12 years that he was in
He
Azkaban.
is
Like
emotionally stunted
yeah,
from, yeah.
yeah, I don't expect him to be had to fully have his stuff together,
Mhm.
but he is very annoying to Harry in a section enough of the book, and like sulky enough that it
Mhm.
just bugs me and like bums me out when I read it, to the point where like at his death, this is when I realized that I was like, eh, on Sirius, more so than I ever thought that I was up to that point, is when Sirius died, I didn't care that Sirius was dead. I cared about what it represented to Harry
Mhm.
and like what Harry felt about losing Sirius. That's why I cared about the death. Like the fact that Sirius wasn't going to be in the books anymore and I wasn't going to read any more about Sirius was like, that part
Thank
didn't
God.
bother me. And it was like, oh, I really thought that I liked him more than I did.
Yeah. Um, how I defend sort of not Sirius, but Sirius being my favorite character. And the reason there was like a period of time where it was away but then got stronger is I started giving myself permission to dislike the author. Imagine what coincided that happened with that. But I started giving myself permission to dislike specific choices that were made at specific moments in the Harry Potter books. So I
Mhm.
think that Order of the Phoenix as a whole amounts to Sirius Black's character assassination.
It
I
really is.
feel, yeah, it is because she puts him in his house. She coops him up for an entire year, makes him as restless as Harry is. So they're never going to get along because they're both suffering greatly due to circumstances of the plot. And then she murders him. And it's in front of Harry. And so he is the sacrificial goat that needs to exist so Harry can continue losing people close to him, so he can continue being this on this hero's journey where you have to do everything on your own and you can't have any comfort.
Yeah.
But at the moment that we just covered on MuggleCast, where Sirius first mentions living with him, Harry living with him, it's this very touching. I beg you to reread it.
Oh yeah.
It's a very touching scene. He's like, I don't know if anybody told you, but
Yeah.
now that we're on this path to redemption here and Peter's gonna, be turned in and I'm gonna be a free man. I don't know if anybody ever told you I'm your godfather. And like, I understand if you want to like, and he's shy about it. He shuffles
Yeah.
his feet and he's like, I don't know if you want to
If
leave
you
your
want to
aunt and
stay with
uncle.
your aunt and uncle, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, and then when Harry's like, the only thing Harry can do because his brain is exploding is going, "Are you insane?" And Sirius is who's been accused of being insane by
It's like
every
probably, yeah.
major media publication for the last 13 years, is just like, of course, I thought you wouldn't want to. Like, like, like he expects it. He's let down, but like the glee when Harry
Yeah.
says, "Of course, when can I move in? Do you have a place?" is real glee. And in that moment, Harry sees the man from his parents' wedding photo for the first time in 13 years. And like, that's Sirius Black. And then in Goblet of Fire, he has an upwards trajectory where he's able to provide lines like, if you want to see the measure of a man, Ronald, look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals.
Hmm.
Perfect guidance. That
Yeah.
is perfect Godfather guidance. And it's only in Order of the Phoenix when Molly Weasley, the world's most biggest mother hen, has to come up with a reason for Harry not to trust him as much, that she comes up with, you see Harry as James, which is not untrue in some circumstances, but blown way the hell out of proportion every minute of the rest of that year.
Yeah.
It's to the point where the movieism is nice one,
Oh, I
James,
hate that so much. I hate that
but
so much.
never would have happened in the books.
Yeah.
Never would have happened in the books, and because there's nuance there that gets buried, and so I really blame the author for because Sirius had to die for the story of what the author wanted to do. But she plays with her food. She before she eats it, she makes him suffer. She makes him miserable to be around. Harry can't stand to be around him. Nobody can stand to be around Harry. And it's a poison that courses through the whole book. And so if your dislike of Sirius as a character is based on books 5 stuff, which how can it not be, right?
Mhm.
Then I understand completely why you're chilled on the guy. But I think
I
he had a
think,
hard life and
yeah.
and and his character was not served, I think, by the plot of book 5. Before his death, his character was not served, but more than that, I would argue it's almost uncharacteristic the way he's portrayed in book 5 too. Not the man we were led to believe. I'm used to characters falling
That,
short. Yeah,
that's the
but
part,
yeah,
and that's the part that I hadn't, that I think was very illuminating in what you just said, because that was very much my feeling on Sirius Black. Was I liked him up until I didn't like him anymore, and then he died. And so I think it was because his most recent uh I guess participation in the
yeah.
plot was so annoying that when he went, I was like, "Oh, well, okay, moving on."
Do you
But
feel
up
that way about
until that,
Lupin?
Lupin, Lupin I enjoy, but obviously I have issues with in book 7.
Yeah,
Um Not great.
that's why I'm
There's a
asking
lot of,
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of characters um, that I get turned off of throughout the series, and I hadn't really thought of it in that light before. But it's, I mean, obviously it's because of the writing, but it's because of particularly how the writing went. Like Tonks, for instance. Tonks was awesome until she wasn't, until she was piney and like
yep.
completely
She
un
allows herself to be ruined, decimated by
a, a
foolishly
date
loving.
rejection. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, and I
Rowling
think,
didn't have to make her so weak. She was
no,
introduced as this strong,
yeah,
spunky young chick.
yeah. So I guess I always thought of that as like, well, these are the characters, and this is why like I get annoyed by the characters. But really, if you break it down, I really liked Sirius up until book 5.
Yeah, and look,
So it's like, it makes total sense. It's like, actually don't like the that part of the writing is kind
no,
of
yeah, and but it's weird
happened to the
because
character.
there was a period of time where it was like every word J.K. Rowling ever wrote is sacred,
Yeah,
right? There was a period of time where a lot of people felt that way,
yeah,
and this whole death of the author thing that's like a common term in when discussing this is like, and separation of art and artists, and but the death of the author is like, once these books are published, we own them. Like the stories and the characters are ours to imagine new worlds or imagine better with, and that kind of that concept of that being the case. And Rowling's own flawed, you know, human, she's just a person.
yeah,
Really, at the end of the day, she's not a god. She's not a queen. She's just a person. So the choices that were made to serve the overall story and certain biases, like we talk about this on MuggleCast sometimes, how every girl that's feminine in the Harry Potter books is shunned. Every girl that is feminine but not, or ultra feminine, like
mhm,
Umbridge is sickly sweet, right? And has an obsession with pink. And any girl that is not a mother by the end of the books, and even some that are killed. like Tonks is killed. And it's just like, why does Tonks's character have to revolve around a man at all? Why is
Shouldn't.
she paired with Lupin, who is not at all her age? And why would she get herself into a relationship where she's pining after this guy? And then why would he have a crisis of faith at the last minute? Because I think he's smarter to police his own emotions and have that freak out sooner. And it's like, when you get into these little individual gripes, you can begin to form kind of these headcanons, or you can begin to selectively ignore entire swaths of books. Like like for me, how I feel about certain characters, if it's informed by anything they did in book 7, I discount it. I don't actually, I never liked book 7.
Hmm.
And I, like a renegade, pretend or like try and forget it even existed. Like, and that's absurd as a Harry Potter fan, but like, that's my opinion on it,
It's
because I
interesting.
think that at that point, the pressure was on. And I think that the author kind of caved, and she wrote a book that is coherent. Some people think, book 7 is their favorite. Great. Harry has a good arc. And that pays off well. But a lot of these characters, I think, get similarly assassinated
Hmm.
by poor choices that they make. Not to say a character can't be flawed, okay, but Lupin already had flaws before book 7. It was interesting to learn
Hmm.
how his lack of self-esteem would affect, his whole character trajectory. But you didn't need to make him a wife abandoner.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the worst part of that was Harry was turning it into a win for Harry, because Harry needed more than anything else a guide to all the camping. And Lupin was the perfect person for that. And it was so good when he showed up and offered, I thought. But then she has Harry take the position of, you SOB, you're doing the exact opposite thing my parents would want by
Mhm.
completely abandoning your kid. And as an orphan, I hate you for it. And it's just like, where did that come from, Harry? You were equally ready to, like, but because she needed that point be made, she made Harry make it. And
Mhm.
nothing has ever felt out of character to me than what Harry says to Lupin and making him feel bad. But like, it gets Lupin off their back so they can continue to be alone and camp for 8 months. Like, it's just like, these choices are just wild. And so if they inform kind of why I
Mhm.
like a character, don't like a character, I discredit them. But the consequences, I can't necessarily be said to be as, you kind of do have to take in a character's full arc in order to properly, I think, defend why they're your favorite or why you like them to a certain extent.
Mhm.
It's just that for me, it exists in this nebulous area where it's mostly canon, but then I'll forgive a moment of like poor writing or stress writing or plot contrivances that would
Mhm.
otherwise cause me to dislike a character.
Mhm. It sounds like what I need to do is revisit my favorite characters through that lens, or up until the. This is actually would be an interesting exercise to do, a character study of each one and their arc, and like at what point do you like go one way or the other, whether you like them or don't like them or whatever, and like what was it that caused that? Was it this decision? Was it, and like where did that come from? That could be a fairly interesting like study to do, probably by somebody smarter than me, but it could be fun. I don't know how many characters you can find your way to do it with, but like Sirius, I think is a really good example of that, because again, he was introduced one way and was that way and was really really cool for a while until he wasn't. Tonks was introduced one way and was really cool that way until she wasn't. Like it, they all kind of, any of them that you could say fell off or fell apart, or to a certain extent, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same pitfall that they fall into, and ultimately that pitfall ends up being plot.
Yeah, like there needed to be an orphan at the end of Harry Potter books to reflect back on Harry's start.
Yeah,
And so Lupin and Tonks both had to die.
yeah,
So the idea that throughout all of Harry's 6th year, Tonks is suffering, and at the end of year 7, she dies, is not necessarily her fault as a
no,
character.
no, it's not.
And yeah, in real life, we all fall in love with somebody who's bad for us, or fall in love with somebody that we should. I mean, I'm not speaking from personal experience, of course not. We all get involved with people we shouldn't be involved in, and we make terrible mistakes in love because we feel. And that's not my issue with Tonks. That's
No.
not what, like, my issue is when you start connecting the idea that a plucky female character that didn't need a man was all of a sudden made to need a man, and then
Mm-hmm.
not only that, but need a man so bad
Yeah,
that it
that was the
changes like
problem.
her Patronus, and then make her into a mom and kill her. I'm sorry, but the author has some issues she was working out with that character,
Yeah.
and it is not the character that was promised, sort of.
Yeah.
And this is where I get like really indignant and like righteous anger about, you know, this book series that we've been reading for 25 years. It's just like ridiculous to even hear myself talk about it. But it's like, this is how passionate these are, the passions that these stories inflame.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it does, though, go back to the writing, and it goes back to the cultural touchstone and what each of us in our heads find so invigorating about these stories to begin with. So I can simultaneously blame a lot on the author that I don't like and be like, well, this author still wrote this stuff that I really engage with in a way that I never engage with anything else.
Yeah. No. Speaking of divisive, last piece, and I will let you get back to your life. The TV series, very divisive currently in its the reaction to it for many reasons. Are you excited about the TV series? Simple as that.
No.
No? Why?
The only people officially attached to the TV series now are J.K. Rowling and her production company and her lawyers. And
That's fair.
I think that we, even in the course of this episode, have talked about some of her lawyers.
Yeah.
And what we haven't touched on is sort of J.K. Rowling and her history of litigation personally, and J.K. Rowling's own political views and the things that she is using lawyers to do now. And so when we talked about this episode on, or when we talked about the TV series announcement on MuggleCast, the hope in all of us on the panel was, wow, what a great opportunity, not only for the TV series to fill in some gaps that the movies omitted. You could tell the whole Marauders story. You could do a whole season of it if you wanted to. But then in terms of diversity,
Yeah.
you could have Hermione be Black from the get-go and not from Cursed Child inventing, or being the first kind of to trailblaze and make Hermione a Black character. You can have more mixed race students at Hogwarts instead of the 5 that exist in the movies. And you can make a more diverse, and because the power of children, like especially in minority groups, seeing themselves represented in an art form is more important than anyone's bigotry, than anyone else's like desire to be like, well, what were the racial quantities of and percentages in Britain in the 90s? Like, was it really that diverse? Like, if I see an Indian student at Hogwarts that isn't Padma or Parvati, I'm gonna flip. Like, ugh. No, you have a chance to make the most diverse and interesting adaptation of Harry Potter yet. Am I excited about the TV series? So I've always thought this book series should be told in a longer format than the movies. The movies skipped too much because they had to. But based on the current people attached to it and like literally no one else at this point, it shows me what the priorities were. The priorities were lock down Rowling into this TV so that we can make these shows and make more money. And she has a team of yes men that are going to be more restrictive. There will never be a trans person on this show. Let's just say that. And because the original books fall short and have faced some criticism of stereotyping of racial characters, like a girl named Cho Chang.
The one that was just recently pointed out to me through another podcast that I hadn't even thought about yet was Kingsley Shacklebolt.
Jesus, when you say it like that.
Right?
So right. Okay. So there are some blind spots, maybe some possible cultural insensitivities that exist in the original books. A TV series under the right helm could smooth those sorts of things out. Do I think J.K. Rowling personally has an interest in smoothing things out? No, she's done nothing but double down on her bigotry
Yeah,
over the last 3
that's
years.
true. Very
I
true.
understand it relates to trans people, not black people, but come on, because like you are not the kind of person that seems open or willing to have a discussion about diversity and inclusion. And so, no, I am not hopeful that the TV series will be at all more inclusive than the movies were. And she may use the opportunity of the TV shows to actually work in some kind of weird trans rhetoric, like the fact that Moaning Myrtle was killed by a boy in a girl's bathroom.
Mm.
The entire like saga is a ticking time bomb of J.K. Rowling being able to get another soapbox in an era where she should be canceled and removed completely from any influence that her current political leanings can possibly do, because they're doing real harm to real people. Sorry, I got so fired and so political there at the end. But no, if this is a soapbox for an author who we've already heard from and gotten the stories from, then I'm not excited about the books. And you would have to get somebody like David Heyman, but who I also feel through Fantastic Beasts, first of all, doesn't owe us anything, but also I question his judgment because some of those other movies were a confusing mess that he didn't stop J.K. Rowling and say, we need to make this make more sense for our audience for. So I don't think anybody is currently in J.K. Rowling's sphere that can stop her from being either convoluted or hurtful to others. And unless you like cast somebody incredibly diverse as like a director, like if Laverne Cox is co-writing the series, okay, then I'll maybe be interested. But unfortunately, no. I think I feel obligated to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel obligated to cover it on MuggleCast, and I'll be bringing up all this stuff surely the closer we get and with every additional announcement. But I love how simple your question was, because the short answer really for me is unfortunately no.
No, and I think everything that you said is fair. And
Thanks.
I think everything that you said is the worst case scenario that it could be. Um, and sometimes the worst case scenario is the more likely. What I've tried to do when I'm thinking about the TV series is as optimistic as I can be is the other side. You're not creating a TV series that doesn't get the stamp of approval and doesn't put money in their pocket. Like that's not going to happen. So the
Yeah.
first thing that you have to do is get the clearance. The best case scenario in my opinion is that it's a silent partnership and it's literally just a stamp of approval. This is my
Yeah.
creative work. Like you're not going to go completely off the rails and like drive it into the ground kind of thing and I'm going to get paid. Um and then somebody else is actually telling the story or interpreting the story to be told
Yeah.
through the TV because and I guess the way that I'm able to warp my mind into some hope that that could be the case is her writing is done. The books exist.
Right.
They are what's being adapted.
Yeah.
There doesn't need to be any pen to paper and direct involvement from her
Right.
aside from making sure that the check clears for
Yeah.
her intellectual property and that's the hope that I'm grasping onto it. So when I do episodes about like what how could the TV series work, but I think I did a podcast episode of literally how the Harry Potter TV series could work, why it won't. Like, you know what I
Oh,
mean, like that kind of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But it's really it it really is. It's both interesting but also disheartening to think of it through the lens of probably what's most likely, and that's what you laid out.
Yeah. And like another thing is that during when the films were being made, the children were in shorter contracts.
Yeah,
So there was a very real possibility that the films would be made without the main trio all back for each film. There was a very serious consideration, I think, between movies 4 and 5 when Emma Watson considered like
yeah,
leaving the
I
series.
remember hearing about that. Yeah,
Yeah, it was huge. And it's like, eventually they were able to all come to terms and negotiate and realize also that it meant so much to them and that they completed their work. Well,
yeah.
future cast members won't have that option.
No.
If you are cast in this TV series, you are signed in a 10-year contract for 8 or however many seasons they want to do, plus Cursed Child, because Warner Brothers is going to get theirs. Short-term contracts don't exist anymore. You're locked in at a certain price with an increase. Like, you don't get to renegotiate. They're not going to play that game twice. They're
And
not
if
going to.
you're
They're going to lose their Hermione twice, or
yeah,
almost lose their Hermione.
and if you're 11 years old, who's making that decision for you?
Your parents.
Yeah. So it's not
Or
even, and
yeah, or it'll have to be, maybe there's a labor law, which these things exist just to like foil, they may be the only course of action. Maybe it'll be that a child can't sign a contract that remains in effect into their adulthood,
yeah,
that
could be.
there will be a defined like renegotiation where once they're a certain legal age they can then get more money or walk away.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking, based on the history of litigious Warner Brothers, that these children who wouldn't want to be in the new Harry, who wouldn't want to be the new Harry Potter
Right.
or the new Hermione Granger, how can you say no to an opportunity as an 11-year-old of being internationally known and famous? And how can your parents say no to that money?
Yeah.
So I see it as quite pessimistically like coercion and
Ugh.
slavery and like horrible worse words by concept, in concept, like by definition, because it's because the Warner Brothers needs the sure thing that's going to make them their money, because Harry Potter is only its cash cow as long as they can continue, putting new book covers on stuff.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to take any chances, and kids are going to get roped into contracts. And it's like, what if one of those kids decides to like come out as trans someday? Like, they're not going to be able to essentially until they're done with the book. It's just a whole mess.
Yeah.
However, here's something. I think it's okay to be excited about the TV show.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's okay to be both.
Yeah.
That's my I guess that's my point. Like for me, I'm not optimistic that it's going to be successful. I'm not optimistic that it's going to be received well. I'm not optimistic that it's going to have the right intentions. I'm not optimistic that the people who are creating it are going to do a good job. But there is a way that this could be presented and could be done that could be very exciting to watch. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's okay for both of those things to be true. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just unfortunate that we're here.
Yeah. I mean, serialized storytelling in TV shows really came to prominence with things like Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the 90s. But more specifically in like the 2000s, you get like shows like Lost. Tune in every week. There's a cliffhanger, pretty much every episode. And TV has supplanted movies as the primary medium for storytellers.
Yeah,
If you're going to tell any serialized story, TV is the medium to do it. Think about
you got room.
literally any event TV series of all time. So TV was always, or has come in to be, the replacement medium. It makes sense to tell the Harry Potter stories, which were never as fully adapted as they could have been in a 2.5 hour per year time slot.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's a lot to be excited about, to be honest, because there's going to be, however it's done, there's going to be a lot to like.
yeah,
That's the other thing is, however it's done, there's going to be a lot to like. So are we strong enough to be like, this is wrong? Are we ever going to not watch it? And that's what they're counting on, I think.
yeah,
This will make a boatload of cash, no matter who's attached, no matter who is cast.
yeah. Unless they just shit the bed.
I guess it could be bad. I mean, if you look at J.K. Rowling's output over the last 10 15 years, it hasn't exactly been the most like resonating, problem free content.
No, and I mean, I guess what I mean by shit the bed is like literally you cast an 11-year-old that ends up just being bad at it. And like the acting is bad, the quality of set is bad, the effects are bad. You know what I mean? Like that that could be a catalyst for everyone saying like we're not going to watch because of the quality, and maybe that's what's the straw that would break the camel's back. But until
Right.
then, like
Yeah.
I think there's just so much interest and intrigue in this fandom still after all this time. I mean, we're talking about the fandom here. We're
Always.
20 years into this fandom, like it's so strong. There's going to be people within the fandom that decide not to watch this, and like do you know what I mean? But like there's going to be enough people that are interested in watching it that it will get watched. It's
Very
going
much
to
so.
make money, and at least until the show proves that it's not worth watching.
Yeah, which I don't think it'll ever do just due to the
I have
sake
to
of its.
imagine, yeah, I have to imagine it can't be that bad. But I mean, there's Netflix is full of bad shows, so who
Sure.
knows?
Well, Andrew, my MuggleCast co-host, likes to say that general audiences are unfamiliar with J.K. Rowling's
Yeah.
problems on toxicity, and I think at one point that was certainly true. I also think it's still true to most extent. That your general audience just wants something to distract the kids with, just want to
Mhm.
put something on that they are going to connect to, that they're going to watch, that they're going to stay off their phones or stay off drugs or whatever to watch. Parents always keeping their kids away from their phones and away from drugs. Uh, you know,
The two things that I'm trying to do with my daughter: stay off of your
but the
phone, stay off of
experience,
drugs.
yeah. So the experience and the joy you'd get in showing your child the latest TV episode of Harry Potter when
Yeah.
you maybe raised them reading the books to them at
Oh, I know. Yeah.
bedtimes, it's irresistible. I'm sorry, like it doesn't matter who you are, how badly you feel about J.K. Rowling, like some of those opportunities, because that's the downside of the art standing for itself, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, it doesn't matter that the author's actively causing harm because I'm going to have a good hour of television with my family.
Mm.
And that has its own value that runs, non-intersecting. It runs parallel to the other issues with the world, but I'm going to enjoy my TV show. And everyone choosing to do that, which they're very right to do, is not stopping, sort of the elephant in the room, the problem. But yeah, it's totally valid to be excited for the films or the books finally getting the adaptation they deserve, because I think the medium has always called for a longer, more extended play than what the movies
Hmm.
could offer. But that doesn't also, like you're saying about both things being true, it doesn't mean it's also not a shameless money grab from the powers that be, because
Yeah.
rather than inventing new content, now they're, which they tried with Fantastic Beasts, now
Yeah.
they're, rehashing and rebooting because they know what works.
Yeah. Well, that was my takeaway when the announcement came that that's what they were doing. My thing was, well, the new content that has been put out there has been received ultimately poorly. The movies have been canceled. Cursed Child is mostly, aside from people watching the play, they mostly say it's terrible. The only content that's actually come out for this fandom that everybody agrees that they like are the books.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if they're going to make new content, it makes sense that they would do what people have proven to like, as opposed to try to make something new again and almost prove that they can. I guess my pie in the sky hope is that the the silent partnership will exist, and
Mhm.
that will be somehow known. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
sure that there will be I'm sure that there would be some kind of a hush hush of her not wanting people to know that she's not really involved. But I'm hoping that it gets out that she's not really involved directly, and it's really just we have to have her on board to make this. And then the TV series is not only able to tell the stories with more with the detail um, that they deserve to be told on screen that the movies couldn't do, but also from that we see some different perspectives from it,
Mhm.
and different portrayals of the events that we know to take place, and then that it launches spin-offs of the new content that people have been really wanting. I just did a 5 backdoor pilot like spin-off ideas for the new
Cool.
TV series where it's like it had like this season launches the Marauder spinoff show. This season launches the
Yeah.
Founder spinoff show. This season launches blah blah
Cool.
blah 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 blah. People have heard me say this before already, but that's like my pie in the sky hope of what it could be, and it's like that's what to me what is exciting about the idea, but like I have no hope that it's actually going to take place that way.
Well,
You
we'll
know,
just have to wait and see.
I guess so. And you're going to be there to chronicle all of it
Yeah.
with MuggleCast. You are, I think you're contractually obligated, if I heard correctly, at least through 25, or is it 26?
It's a comfy life. I mean,
Thank you.
because apart from the content, interacting with my co-hosts, we all
Yeah.
really do actually like each other. And the idea that we have been doing this 18 years with four of
Oh my gosh.
there have only been 7 or maybe 8 hosts of MuggleCast, and 4 of them are still doing this after so much, time, shows that we really, really, really do get along and like each
Yeah.
other. And um, we're all committed to quality, and we're all committed to our podcast has taken a stance against J.K. Rowling, who we refer to as the author. And we are not shying away from topics that are uncomfortable to us as a result of that stance as well. But we genuinely enjoy talking about something that meant so much to us, and we genuinely enjoy interacting with each other. So yeah, the idea of still doing MuggleCast another several years yet is joyful, because it has meant so much to me, and it's provided so many opportunities like this one for me to talk with interesting people and have a lot of fun while doing it.
Well, I appreciate you slumming it. Aside from MuggleCast, like plug anything and everything.
Plug anything. Oh
Anything.
God, what do I want to plug? Okay, if you're watching, did you watch HBO's The Last of Us?
I haven't seen it. It's possibly a series that could be covered on this on this podcast
Cool.
in 5 years. I don't
I
know.
was a huge fan of those games. Yeah, I've been a huge fan of those games, and I did a podcast when the show came out. And it's on. So I have a personal podcast that's called "Thank You for Spieling," and it's available wherever podcasts are found. I've had about 23 episodes that were just me interviewing my friends
Mm.
about things that they were passionate about, and it was a lot of fun. Although there were a few episodes actually that contained very true sciencey details about COVID, because that was the year that happened.
Yeah.
And there's some really good content on the podcast feed that is some of like my proudest stuff of all time as podcaster. But then the podcast "Thank You for Sporing" is spores being like the fungus that controls people in The Last of Us, which causes zombie apocalypse.
Now that
Is
makes more sense.
yeah, is released on the same feed. So "Thank You for Spieling" is my plug for myself. And but the recap episodes of the show are all on that as well. And I did it with my buddy, and yeah, it's just been good. The few times I mean, I've been on multiple podcasts even in the long term, many years, for like different podcasts throughout the years, but "Thank You for Spieling" was the first time that it was like my show completely. And so the creative control that afforded me, and I have had like Micah on a 2-part episode before as my guest, and I had my mom on as a guest, and there's even a recording of myself as a, I think, 9-year-old that I did on a cassette tape that I later found and released as a podcast episode. So I had my own radio show. You would love that one, actually. It's
That'd be
called
fantastic.
the Eric and Nobody Else Show. And
I remember seeing that episode title.
yeah. It's because the radio I listened to had a morning show called the Mike and Dave Show, and I was just like, well, what friends will record as Eric and Nobody Else? But yeah, I just had a wild amount of fun doing that, and it's currently on hiatus. I don't know what season 3 of that show will look like, but check it out, because I think there will be a topic of one of the episodes or more that each of you find interesting.
I can vouch for that. I was literally just listening to the 1 year recap.
with Juliana.
Yeah, last night I was listening to it. And it was hearing you reflect on it, it made me like almost bookmark different episodes I wanted to go back to prior to that. I just haven't gotten all the way back there yet, because I had heard another one, and I, for the life of me, cannot remember which one it was that I'd heard previously, and then I was listening to that one. Um, I did not see Last of Us, so I had to go. I had to at least scroll back
Yeah,
prior
skip through
to.
that. Yeah, for
I
sure.
had to scroll back
Really no
because I
pressure.
just didn't. Because those ones I wasn't familiar with, but as soon as I got to stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to listen to these. So everybody else should too.
Yeah, but thank you for the opportunity. And thanks for having me on Belated Bed. I got to tell you, this would we get on well. I don't think this will be my last appearance on this show.
I hope not. At some point, the chapters are going to pick back up. I'm very close to where you all are in your chapter by chapter. When I put those kind of on the back burner for a second, it might be you all's fault. I don't know, but
Don't want to
that's somewhat of a
compete
joke.
with the
But
big fish, huh?
you know what? That's actually nobody cares about this. But that's one of the reasons that this started as a Harry Potter podcast. It was never intended to be a Harry Potter podcast, quote unquote. And I said that in my opening episode, and I credited you all as like, if you want a Harry Potter podcast,
Aw.
like go there. This was always intended to be a belated binge podcast. Some of my favorite forms of entertainment that I have found, I was incredibly late to find them, and Harry Potter was among one of those. And so I'm covering it. I'm covering Sons of Anarchy. I'm covering The Office, like these things that I really, really, really liked that I almost missed entirely. And part of the reason that it started out as Harry Potter is when I started this podcast, there were two actors from the Sons of Anarchy show that were doing a rewatch podcast, and there's still Office ladies, two actresses from The Office that were doing rewatch podcasts. And I was like, there's no scenario in which anybody would want to hear me give any thoughts on these episodes while those are happening. So I was like, well, I'm going to jump into Harry Potter, see if this has legs. There's plenty I can talk about, and then I'll introduce the other ones later. And that's what's ultimately happened so far. But yeah, the fact that, but I also wanted to do more topic with you, since we would be talking about chapters that you literally just talked about on your own podcast if we stuck to the chapter by chapter format. So it all worked out kind of perfect.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate pivoting.
No, it's great. I'm so glad you were here. This has been a ton of fun for me. Very fulfilling. As far as all the things, belatedbinge.com for the stuff. Patreon.com/belatedbinge for bonus content, other perks that are there. Right now I'm actually sharing a sequel fan fiction I started writing in 2020 of the Sons of Anarchy TV show. I'm doing like I'm reading the chapters audiobook style. I got 11 chapters into this thing, and I'm sharing them on Patreon. So if you're interested in hearing that, you can hear all of the chapters that have been recorded and edited to this point. As I'm saying this out loud, the first 3 chapters are available. I still have editing to do on several others and several more to record, but as I get done with them, they're going on Patreon. There's not a release schedule for those. I'm not holding them back for content's sake. As soon as they're available, they're available to the patrons. Of course, there's Potter content on there, a whole bunch of bonus episodes that I've done there, behind the mics that I've done there, extra chats from guests that I've had, all of that. And like I said, on the main feed here, we will get back into chapter by chapter type stuff here very soon. I think we're in early Prisoner of Azkaban at this point on those, so I'll probably do a little recap, maybe see if I can convince Eric here to come back on for some of those chapters.
You're lucky.
Maybe
it's my favorite book, so yeah, could probably do that.
Again, thank you for doing this, and thank you all for listening and telling all your Potterhead friends how cool they would be too if they joined us on our belated binge of Harry Potter.
That'd be awesome.